You're watching The Legal Breakdown. So, Glenn, I want to dive in here to the implications of Hope Hicks' testimony in Donald Trump's criminal trial in New York. But first, just for those watching right now, if you want to follow along with the entirety of our coverage, we'll be doing daily comprehensive coverage of this criminal prosecution in New York. Please make sure to subscribe to both of our channels. Okay, so Glenn, a lot of people were looking at Hope Hicks as, the smoking gun witness in this entire trial. What are the implications of what she did on the witness stand?
Brian, I'm so glad you opened with the smoking gun, because that's what we're always looking for when every witness testifies. And we're going to talk in a minute about why smoking gun evidence is really not a thing in criminal trials. But first, let's talk about what Hope Hicks did say, because it was actually pretty damning. Among other things, this from the New York Times, she said things like, Donald Trump is basically an image-obsessed micromanager, somebody who knows why he's writing $30,000 check after $30,000 check to Michael Cohen. She said that it was Mr. Trump's opinion that it would have been bad for the story to come out before the election, the Stormy Daniels story. That I wouldn't call smoking gun, but it's pretty damaging because, Donald Trump was trying to spin this like, well, I was just trying to protect my family from hearing bad things about me. And actually, Hope Hicks did say, yeah, that was a concern of his. But what he said was that would have been really bad if it came out before the election. And then I really enjoyed this reference. They asked Hope Hicks, well, would Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's attorney and fixer, have just paid the $130,000 to Stormy Daniels out of the goodness of his heart to try to, do a favor for Donald Trump that Donald Trump didn't even know about? She actually scoffed on the record and then said something like, yes, that is not within Michael Cohen's character to do something like that. So, I wouldn't say any of this was sort of directly incriminating smoking gun evidence, but let's take on the smoking gun thing. Every single criminal trial it's like putting a puzzle together, right? You don't know, when you look at each individual piece of the puzzle, what picture will emerge. Rarely do we have smoking gun evidence. You build it puzzle piece by puzzle piece. And so the prosecutors are putting the pieces of the puzzle together. They have the Hope Hicks piece. They will have the Stormy Daniels piece and the Karen McDougal piece. And the Madeleine Westerhout piece, don't forget her. She has not been discussed much, but she was the director of Oval Office operations who was always kind of hovering around listening to everything Donald Trump said, perhaps when he didn't even realize she was listening. You, of course, have the Michael Cohen piece. So all of these puzzle pieces will be assembled, and then a picture will emerge. And that picture will be that Donald Trump made hush money payments and then criminally falsified business records to cover them up, which basically represented campaign finance crimes, all to gain unfair advantage in a presidential election. What I will say, Brian, is during closing arguments in a criminal case, you will have the defense attorney urging the jurors to look at each piece of the puzzle. For example, look at the Hope Hicks piece of the puzzle. And if it doesn't convince you beyond the reasonable doubt that Donald Trump committed any crimes, if it's not smoking gun evidence on its four corners, throw it away, then pick up the next piece of the puzzle, to which I would argue in my rebuttal argument, ladies and gentlemen, is that the way you put a puzzle together? What the defense attorney just urged you to do? No. You assemble it and then the picture emerges. So Hope Hicks, I would say, didn't have smoking gun evidence, but she had important and, in some sense, sharply incriminating evidence to offer against Donald Trump.
Now, one part of her testimony that really kind of caught the nation's attention was when she started crying on the witness stand. Can you speak about that moment?
It's so funny because she was asked about her time in the White House and inferentially her relationship with Donald Trump over the years, and she broke down. I can't tell you how many times I have experienced that in a criminal trial when, there's such anticipation to beginning to testify about incriminating information, particularly if it's against a defendant that the witness had a relationship with, whether plutonic or otherwise, or a business relationship, somebody that the witness may still have some affection for. And all of a sudden, all of the emotion of having to actually testify under oath concretely against that person just overtakes a witness, and the witness breaks down on the stand. I've had it happen in any number of cases. I once had it happen, Brian, not to tell war stories, but I had a young man that I prosecuted for trying to steal a police officer's Glock, and the way he thought he would go about stealing the police officer's Glock was to shoot and kill the police officer and take it. The officer survived, even though he was shot through the neck. And when he hit the stand and testified, when we reached that moment in time when I said, Officer Gerald Anderson was his name, can you please describe what happened at the moment you heard a shot ring out? He said, it felt like somebody hit me in the back of the neck with a sledgehammer, and all of a sudden, Officer Gerald Anderson just dissolved on the stand, sobbing uncontrollably. Mind you, he had never reacted that way in the many prep sessions we had when he related the story of what happened to him. So even a seasoned police officer, this man was a master patrol officer and a 10-year Marine Corps veteran before joining the police force. I've seen this happen over and over again in court, and it happened to Hope Hicks.
Glenn, does it kind of hurt Donald Trump to see that? Because she wouldn't have been crying if she had something good to say, or if she thought that Donald Trump did nothing wrong, or that her testimony wasn't going to hurt him. Does the fact that she was crying, visibly upset about having to be there with, testifying against somebody who she clearly has some affinity toward, does the fact that she was crying kind of hurt him in the sense that she wouldn't be crying if it was something good, if she had something good to say, if she didn't think he had some legal exposure?
Yeah, that's a great point. In the eyes of the jurors, they will be drawing all important conclusions and inferences from not only the words Hope Hicks spoke, but her body language, her demeanor, and perhaps most of all, her emotion. How did it impact Donald Trump? I don't know, but if I had to, engage in informed speculation, I think he's devoid of empathy. So the only thing he probably felt in the moments when she was breaking down and then incriminating him in her testimony is he was probably cursing her out in his mind and saying, this is going to hurt me. And that's probably all that ever matters to Donald Trump.
Scale of 1 to 10, how effective do you think Hope Hicks was for the prosecutors against Donald Trump here?
Great question. I would say she was a very effective witness because she was extremely credible and circumspect based on the reporting. She didn't try to oversell things. She didn't try to undersell things. On the incriminating evidence front, in isolation, I would say she was maybe a 6, perhaps a 7. But once the puzzle pieces continue to be assembled, we don't even know at this point how damaging her testimony ultimately will be when it is put together with, for example, Michael Cohen's testimony, or Stormy Daniels' testimony, or Karen McDougal, or Madeleine Westerhout's testimony. But here's why I think the prosecutors believed she was an important, effective, and incriminating witness. There is one tried and true tactic of prosecutors. When you are approaching a Friday afternoon session and you know the jurors are about to be dismissed for the weekend, what you do is you try to take your strongest, most compelling, and most incriminating piece of evidence or information and put it before the jury right before the weekend break. Why? So they can take it home and mull it over and consider it and let it sink in, largely unrebutted by the next witness or the next piece of evidence. Now, that's not only a prosecution tactic, it's also a defense tactic. When the defense is in their case in chief, when they're presenting their evidence, they will do precisely the same thing on a Friday afternoon. Try to take a piece of evidence that they believe is really good for their client and put it before the jury right before the jury breaks for the weekend and goes home. That is a sure sign, the fact that the prosecuted ended with her on a Friday afternoon, that they believe it was effective, incriminating evidence, and we are likely to see just how incriminating when we begin to see the other pieces of the evidentiary puzzle.
All right, well, we'll continue to stay on top of this prosecution as it continues to play itself out, and as prosecutors call more witnesses, among them being Michael Cohen, whose testimony we're waiting for here. So for those watching, if you want to stay on top of Donald Trump's trial in New York as it plays itself out, Glenn and I will be doing daily comprehensive coverage. Please make sure to subscribe to both of our channels. The links are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Taylor Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.